Now to some pressing matters. The president of the Ghana Institution of Engineers, Leslie Alex Aye, says the scrapping of the Aviation Ministry by President Akufo-Addo will have some dire financial and investment consequences for the country's aviation industry. On January 21, the president explained that some of the special purpose ministries under the president's first term, including the Aviation Ministry, have been realigned because they have indeed achieved the purposes for which they were created. Of course, but Engineer Alex Aye says that the realignment of the Aviation Ministry into the Ministry of Transport could be counterproductive to the growth of the aviation industry. Let's get much more on this discussion as we bring in Sean Mendes. He's an aviation expert. He joins us via Zoom. So, Sean, we're grateful that you could join us at such a short notice. First of all, do we really need an aviation ministry, first of all?
Thanks for having me again, Charles. I think that's a good question to ask. The aviation ministry is actually a relatively new phenomenon in Ghana. If you recall, it was first introduced around 2005 or 2006 in the second Kufuor administration. And even since it was first introduced, it's been consolidated. Aviation has been consolidated under transport for a longer period than it actually has been independent. So I think there's, the history has shown that aviation has functioned both as an independent ministry as well as under transport. And as was explained, I think, when the president nominated the different ministers for the ministries, it depends on what the objectives are for the ministry in the upcoming administration. So I can see the benefits on both sides of that argument.
But of course, we're going to be bringing back the interview that Engineer Alex Aye, had with us. But Sean, his main argument is that looking at the competition regarding the aviation space in Africa, having to scrap this particular ministry could pose dangerous threats to investment and trade patterns under the aviation space. Do you, sound this particular judgment?
No, on that argument, I definitely disagree with it. I think, if you look around the world, and in fact, even if you look around Africa, Ghana is among the smallest countries in the world to actually have had a dedicated aviation ministry. Much larger aviation sectors like the US, the EU, etc., just consolidate aviation as a subsector under transportation. And even in Africa, I mean, you can go to places, Nigeria being an exception, but South Africa has a transport ministry, Kenya has transport ministries and things like this. And all of these, are able to function by putting the right attention on aviation within a larger umbrella. And that may be something that, that Ghana may look at. A compromise may be to have a deputy minister focused on aviation under a larger umbrella like transport, or as under the office of the president or something similar. It would give aviation both the attention it would need as a sector to promote development, as well as a bigger tent for policy making and budget.
Interesting, but yet again, we're also having some experts raise concern about your own argument, especially when they're concerned about the single African air transport market, which, of course, till now hasn't been fully implemented. So that for us to have a special purpose vehicle under the signature of the Aviation Ministry could inject more intervention to Ghana's aviation space. Once again, do you agree to this dynamic?
I think it's less important to have a separate ministry than it's to ensure that the expertise, the human resources who have gained the expertise in the aviation field, that is the civil servants, the directors of the ministries and so forth, that they continue to work under whichever ministry has the responsibility for aviation or wherever else. It's not as though a ministry in itself is a magic solution to aviation issues. It is the people within the ministry, whether that's the minister themselves to bring the political power, or it's the technocrats and the bureaucrats themselves who are able to implement the policies and develop the policies. I don't necessarily see the ministry itself as the solution to it. If you're looking to shrink the size of government, which is something that the president has said is one of his objectives, the aviation ministry, consolidating it under transportation, would give it a natural home, and it becomes a logical move that could be taken. I don't think the aviation sector would suffer necessarily simply by consolidating it under transport. I think there's the potential for the right transport minister with the right people advising and assisting him to actually, have access to larger budgets, to more clout, so to speak, politically, and be able to develop it both domestically, regionally, as well as internationally.
Well, Sean, even as we discuss matters regarding the aviation ministry, I would also want to draw your attention to this story you're picking about the national carrier, which of course we're learning that will be some partnership with that of Egypt Air. Once again, we've had the president of the engineers organization object to this particular move, saying that it could cause matters of conflicts of interest. Where do you stand on this issue?
I think a national carrier is something that has limited utility to a country like Ghana, where the private sector has shown itself to be perfectly capable, in fact, probably better capable, judging on track records, of running airlines than a government-owned entity has been. So I definitely agree. There are questions that need to be asked, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a national airline or an airline, which, from what I understand, from what the previous minister has said before, would be a government-backed airline, but not necessarily a government-owned airline, where a external strategic partner would actually be the ones running it. So I think the devil will be in the details. Certainly, I don't think there's prima facie the definitive need to have a national carrier, but I don't necessarily say that a national carrier would be a bad idea straight off the bat. We need to know the details of it, and to this point, as far as I'm aware, the details have not been forthcoming to the public.
Exactly. And speaking of details, we've also been scouting websites from Egypt Air in that regard, and we have specific news items that lay bare the fact that indeed we're going to be having Egypt Air as possible partners to this particular development. How do you respond to the matters of the conflict of interest? Because we're looking at an airline having to assist a country have a national carrier. Where does the conflict of interest fall within this line of argument?
Well, there's definitely going to be some level of conflict. Whether that's acceptable to the government of Ghana or not is to be determined. Egypt Air itself is a government-owned airline. So while you may not be having, you may be saying that the government of Ghana will not be interfering in the airline's operations. If Egypt Air is your strategic partner, that means the government of Egypt is going to be calling the shots. Now, is that acceptable to Ghana? I don't know. That's something for the parliamentarians, for the elected representatives, for the ministers, for the president to make that determination. Egypt Air itself is in very dire financial conditions right now. They are in need of a government bailout to continue operating themselves. So even if there were to be a deal, it is not as though Ghana will be going into partnership with with someone who had all the resources. They would be dependent on the government of Egypt's handouts, effectively, to make this project run. So there are questions to be asked. I don't know the answers to it, but definitely I would be interested to see the answers to those questions before I can either back it or say it's something that probably isn't going to work.
Well understood. Of course, we're also waiting to get more details into this development. Sean Mendes, we're grateful that he joined us. He's an aviation expert, helping us dissect matters regarding the aviation ministry, the scrapping of it, as well as the development story regarding that of the national carrier and partnerships we're hearing with that of Egypt.